Now, the culture wars have gone to Broadway. A pair of sign language interpreters, they were axed from the popular Lion King musical for being white in a play set in Africa. How dare they? ASL interpreter Keith Wan was told to, quote, wipe his white tears after he sued for discrimination. The claim was made by the ASL director Shelley Guy, was that Keith, quote, is not a black person and therefore should not be representing the Lion King. Now, there's a couple of issues here, Daisy. One, neither is Keith Wan or any of the actors lions or hyenas, and the play is, of course, The Lion King. So, you know, why don't we have animals doing it? But apart from that, the man isn't even on stage. You know, he's doing a service to the deaf theatre goers to help them connect with the story. I mean, just because the thing is set in Africa, what are they saying? There are no white people in Africa?
Well, that is exactly the first thing I thought of, Caleb, aside from my initial reaction of, oh, God, woke Broadway is so annoying. I thought to myself, hang on a minute, just because something's set in Africa doesn't mean that all Africans are black. I mean, that sounds like a pretty racist assumption, if you ask me, that all Africans are somehow black. There are a lot of native white Africans. Certainly, you know, look at countries like South Africa and Zimbabwe. There are white populations there. They're born there. They're raised there. They're very much as African as a black person who's born in Africa. So this whole sort of concept that, oh, if you basically, it seems to be if you're involved with the Lion King, you have to be black, I think that's particularly racist. There's all sorts of assumptions there and perpetuating stereotypes and stuff. So again, it's this weird woke serpent that sort of just eats itself. And the thing is, okay, if you make the sign language interpreters exit the fold because they're not black, well, where does it stop? Do we have everyone in the orchestra? Everyone playing in the band has to be black? Do all the ushers have to be black? Do all the stagehands have to be black? I mean, how this just where does it stop? So I'm very glad that case settled. I feel very sorry for the gentleman who was kicked off, and I hope that he got a tidy sum of money out of it. That's what I hope.
Well, I tell you what, if they ever remake Love Actually, and it's coming up to that time of year where we'll start busting that film out again, they won't be able to use Hugh Grant again. They'll have to find an actual former Prime Minister. Because, of course, you know, we can only play roles that we ourselves understand these days. Now, some better news. The UK has introduced a public order bill, which is designed to give police powers to keep motorways and streets clear in response to this sort of growing problem of these climate activist idiots who block the roads, glue themselves to the roads, they deface public property and are throwing mashed potatoes at paintings and all sorts of nonsense. Finally, Daisy, this minority of eco-idiots is being taken care of. We need to do the same here in Australia, surely.
Well, look, it's an interesting thing, isn't it? I'm sure there are going to be an awful lot of Brits who are particularly happy with this expansion of power, because certainly, I mean, these idiots, they do the most, like, they put people in danger. They stop ambulances from getting to hospital. You know, they block the roads. They could cause car accidents. They climb all over things. They put themselves and other people in danger. The flip side of it, though, is like, do we really want to give the police extra powers to shut down peaceful protests, particularly in the wake of COVID? And certainly I really hate to agree with Democratic Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez here, but she was right at the end of 2021 when she said that protest is meant to make people feel uncomfortable. It's meant to disrupt. Now, where you draw the line on that, though, is the different question. And I guess it comes down to really you've got a clash of rights. On one hand, you've got the right to free speech, the right to peaceful protest. And the other hand, you've got people's, right to, I guess, to safety or to, not be on the road and potentially, have their cars obstructed. So there's a clash of rights there going on. I think, like I said, there'll be a lot of Brits who are very pleased because the hold-ups in the city from these ridiculous protesters have just been completely insane. But it makes my inner libertarian really quite anxious, Caleb, when I see this kind of expansion of powers for the police. So I think the balancing act is going to be very interesting to watch.
Yeah, I get that, but it's, you should have the right to peaceful protest, absolutely. But when you get to the point of gluing yourself to the road, it's not only a danger to yourself, it's a danger to the rest of the population. Like, if an ambulance has to get past, etc., particularly this stuff that's been going on in the UK, where they've, glued themselves to motorways. Once you're on the motorway, it's very hard to get off it until you find an exit. They've basically got a captive audience. I think it goes beyond just peaceful protest. And the people it hurts the most are working class people. You just want to get to work in the morning, and there's some idiot gluing themselves to the road telling you can't go to work. I mean, to be honest, I think we should just leave them there. If you want to glue yourself to the road, go for your life. You'll go hungry at some point, won't you?
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, just leave them there and see how they like it, and then we'll see if they decide to protest like that again. And the thing is, like, you're absolutely right when you say that about working class people. They're not actually. This is where I get very conflicted on it. They're not actually hurting the people they want to hurt. They're not making waves with the people they apparently want to make waves with. I mean, the government doesn't care. The government doesn't care about any of that. They're not going to listen to them. So the people who get hurt by it are people who are trying to get to work, who are trying to get to hospital. And this is what I mean when I talk about a clash of rights here, whose rights generally win out. I think when these people are putting themselves and other people in danger, you have to think about the general public rather than the protesters.
All right, now let's go over to the US, and this really sheds a light on the stupidity of this woke mob. A statue in Chicago of Honest Abe, Abraham Lincoln, was vandalised with red paint with the words colonizer and land back. I mean, do these people have a clue about history? This is the bloke who got rid of slavery in the US. He is the great emancipator, abolished slavery during the Civil War era, and this is the guy that the woke idiots have decided they're going to go after. I mean, do they actually know what they're going on about?
Oh, God, I don't think any of them do. I think they're just kind of bored and sad and purposeless, so this is how they decide to spend their free time, throwing painted statues. I mean, for God's sake, get a job. That'll occupy you in the daytime. But honestly, of all of the former US presidents that you are going to, vandalise a statue of, Abraham Lincoln is probably not the one you want to do it to. For that exact reason. He was sort of the original American anti-racist, if you want to use that terminology. I believe what they were annoyed about was his history with, in the indigenous tribes. And yeah, okay, maybe there's some complexity there, so to speak. But Caleb, as we know, nobody has a completely spotless legacy. I mean, historical relativism is ridiculous. You can't judge the times then by values now. And if they're really, really fussed about it, why don't they put up new statues? Forget the old ones, build some new ones to stand next to Abe Lincoln to represent something else. So, yeah, really just it's the usual stupid behaviour from these woke morons.
I know, and it's the same as, every time Australia Day comes around, they throw paint on Captain Cook. Now, Captain Cook wasn't on the First Fleet. He was in Australia for all of about a week. He rocked up and tried to have good relations with the Indigenous people and then buggered off again. He wasn't the bloke who colonised the land, but these people don't have a clue what they're on about. I think that's abundantly clear. Now, on climate change, the climate queen herself, we don't hear from her very often now, but Greta Thunberg, she's joined in an activist lawsuit against Sweden's government for insufficient climate policies. Now, I don't know on what grounds this actually has any legal precedent, Daisy, do you?
No, I don't think there's really any legal precedent. And I think perhaps poor Greta Thunberg is suffering from something called a relevance deprivation syndrome. I think she's probably missing all the spotlight that was shone on her by these, exploitative global elites back in 2018 and 2019. And now she's kind of trying to throw her hat in the ring or something like that. But this is just mindless, meaningless virtue signaling and a total waste of time and money. And the thing is, I remember this was done before. I think, in sort of 2016, 2017, there was a group of young teenagers in the US who sued the Obama administration for the exact same thing, not doing enough to tackle climate change. And of course, they were unsuccessful because it's a ridiculous thing to sue a government for. And aside from anything else, it demonstrates how these climate activists, the goalposts, they will never be happy, Caleb. They will always shift the goalpost. I mean, Sweden has committed to net zero by 2045 plus 100% renewable renewable energy, and also they accelerated their policy recently by 5 years after, I think, pressure from activists. That to me is really radical. You know, net zero by 2045, that is a radical policy, but it's no longer radical enough. So again, where does all of this end? What is the end point here?
Oh, I think the end point's probably, you know, get rid of the human race. We're so destructive. Let's turn off all the power and go back to being cavemen. Daisy, always a pleasure. Always a pleasure to put the world to rights with you. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much, Caleb. This was great fun as always.